Now, for instance, there was a long trend with the models becoming like of all colors, of all, even genders and stuff, which I think is very interesting because suddenly I'm not photographing white young girls full of themselves anymore. Like literally, almost never, which is fantastic. A joy not to do that. So I photograph, three kids from an African village that were cast, and three boys literally that came from somewhere in Uganda, and they came to Paris, and suddenly they're standing there and laughing their little asses off in a fantastic situation, and it was absolutely wonderful.
Woof woof and namaste. This is Hilldog welcoming you to Kanha Cast, a series of conversations from Kanha Shantivana, the International Center of Heartfulness in Telangana, India.
Today I'm speaking with Rasmus Mogensen. Rasmus is a photographer who has worked with Vogue, Elizabeth Arden, Escada, Swarovski and more. Based in Paris and New York, he is the grandson of legendary Danish architect and furniture designer Boer Mogensen. Rasmus's parents were among the first heartfulness practitioners in Denmark.
For those of you who don't know, Heartfulness is a worldwide movement providing free meditation training to everyone. Since there will be a lot of reference to heartfulness in this talk, let me just fill you in on the heartfulness guides. The first guide was Lalaji, then there was Babuji. From 1983 to 2014, Chariji was the heartfulness guide, and from 2014 to the present day, Daaji has been the heartfulness guide. So Rasmus, you are into photography, and you come from a family that's really been into the arts in a way. I mean,
Architecture.
Your grandfather was very famous.
Very famous. And my other grandfather was a garden architect.
Oh, wow.
And ended up committing suicide because the Danish, as far as I know, the King of Denmark was not very happy with the project that he did.
Oh, really?
This is actually my mom's father, biological father, when she was only 4 years old. And her sister Michaela was only 2 years old. So, I come from a background of crazy artists in some way.
Creators in a way.
Yeah, creators in some way, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And when did you discover that you wanted to create stuff?
I discovered that already when I was 8 years old at school, because I went to a sort of like private school where we had an English section, but also a lot of creative workshops, so to speak, that my grandfather, as far as I know, was part of creating the school back in the day. And I had photography there. Hated it because I thought it was taking forever to develop the films. But my professor, she kept me going. And it became my passion really early on, like at 8 years old already.
At 8 years old. So at 8 years old, you knew the process of developing film and stuff like that.
Yeah, I started I did actually. I developed films and stuff, and became very serious about it, wanting to be a photographer. I don't know if I was very serious about doing photography because I was just photographing my, rabbits in the garden or whatever. But yeah, that's basically it. And then when I was like 15, I think I started assisting for free in Denmark, different photographers, and moved on from there to, how did that happen? I moved to New York when I was 17. Borrowed some money from my mom.
Wow.
Because a makeup artist, I had an exhibition in Denmark when I was 17, and a makeup artist wrote in the book of the exhibition that she worked with Irving Penn, and who was my great idol, who is the photographer of all photographers of all time, I think, still, and who died like a few years back. And I was very sort of excited to see if I could get a job for him because she could introduce me. I mean, it took a year. So I was in New York for a year working with some photographers that were not nice. And then I met Irving Penn, and I was very disappointed because, we have a master in Sarge Mark, and this was supposedly a master in photography, but his character didn't go with
Oh, so he was disappointing on a human level.
Human level, I got disappointed, but I mean, it's dangerous for me to say that because he is like the master of all time. He's the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
Sure.
So, but I didn't personally like him, and I didn't want to stay back and work for him, which is probably a massive mistake to some level. But I just didn't want to stay in New York. And a little side story, which is much sweeter related to Sarge Mark, is that our master Charity didn't want me there. So he kept telling my sister that you should tell Rasmus to come back. And I was like, no way. I even talked to him on the phone. I said, I'm staying. And then he said, then at least go see our brother in Staten Island, Daaji.
Wow.
And I was like, it's too far, and I never went, and I regretted it ever since because I was like, that would have been nice. But I knew Daaji quite well from Denmark and stuff, but not back then.
Not back then.
It's just funny.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, it is funny. I could have ended up in his house instead of all alone and crying in Manhattan for a year. But,
what about, so at 8 years old, you discover photography. Yeah. There's this teacher who's telling you about it and who's guiding.
Oh, yeah, that was actually 5 hours per week.
Wow.
2 hours on Tuesdays, as far as I remember, and 3 hours on Thursdays. So we really had, like, we had dark rooms, and we were developing, printing.
Wow.
So I got the basis there of, like the real basis of the technique. What is an f-stop and opening times and all that. But, kids running around with a camera in the schoolyard, that's it. There was nothing more to it than that. We did not have any sort of history or how can you say, point of view on art or anything like that. There was no teaching on the artistic level.
Sure. So it was just the technique, basically, of just capturing a photograph.
Start out, exactly. Yeah. And my then photo teacher went on to becoming an editor of a really quite famous photo magazine in Denmark. He became the editor of that magazine, which helped me later on because he made some nice interviews with me when I was a young starting photographer around 18, 19. So that was sweet. But yeah, I think that actually kind of shows because then after school finished, this was basic school, right? So when I became 15, I started assisting. And actually, I also went to an art school, a sort of what do you call that? Reportage, journalistic art school. And I was just too young for all the blabbing there, or the talking. I thought photography is like it's a visual thing, so let's do that first. But I do think that. When I look at the Danish photographers, which is not so much the case anymore, but up through the last 30 years, that we're very good technically maybe, but it's taken me and still is something that I'm battling with a lot, and which is like it doesn't matter how good you are technically if what is in the picture is not really talking to people looking at it. And I think I was way too focused on shapes and lighting and the technical aspect, and now with the unfortunate for us event of Instagram and social media, which has totally destroyed to some extent our business, it has opened up the floodgates to everybody being able to be a photographer, being a photographer quite easily. And honestly, I mean, even AI now can make pictures that are unbelievable.
Yes, stunning pictures.
Yeah. So this is something that I had to think a lot about because I had a very difficult period in my business, and COVID did not help at all. So suddenly I sort of had to reinvent myself and focus much more on content, what is in the picture. And I think that's where we can survive, if we can survive, is that, AI is one thing, but we all I really hate when I look at a feed now on Instagram that you actually don't know if it's a true photo that you look at when you're looking at people's feeds, like the wall.
Yeah. No, in fact, just yesterday I was reading an article about this guy who'd got tons of followers just because of his portraits. And yesterday he kind of owned up that they were AI portraits. Those people don't exist. And he created entire elaborate stories that this is Sarah likes this, Sarah does this, Sarah. Exactly. And these beautiful black and white photographs which are AI generated.
It's scary. And so, it's scary. It really is scary. But at the same time, it's the reality of things. and we'll have to adapt because that's what humans always have to. We can't change the circumstances.
Absolutely. Do you remember your first camera, Rasmus? Do you remember when you got your first?
I do. I do remember I did not buy it myself because I was 8 years old. It's a Pentax.
Wow.
K1000 it was called.
The Pentax K1000.
Yeah,
the K series is still going.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Isn't
I
it?
don't know. Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know anything about. I was very. I loved that camera. I still had it until some years ago. I don't know if I got rid of it.
And what were the photographs you were taking during school after those between 8 to 17? You said
Because 8 to 17, it came from, which is a natural sort of like human, for a young man, young boy. It's like, I photographed my animals in the garden, and then it went on to becoming pretty girls, which I thought was kind of, it was what it was. But I went from being just, photographing whatever was in front of me, and then having to monetize it in some way and make it a job. I started assisting a lot of commercial photographers where it was really like just, packaging or whatever, vacuum cleaners. I did massive campaigns with really whom became my master photographer. We did a lot of Bang & Olufsen sales of all those products, and we did like testimonials with people having it all over the world. So there was a part of that, but for me, fashion was always very attractive probably because of beautiful women early on in my life, but also because of Irving Penn and what I had seen. My grandmother was quite into Issey Miyake, who was a great designer of clothes, and I always loved those images, and that had nothing to do with the personality wearing them. It was really about the shape of the clothes and stuff. So I actually based my sort of I didn't base, but that became the backbone of what I was doing, and it became empty. And I do think when I look at some of the work now, I think that Irving Penn's work, what I didn't look at back then when I was really in the beginning, was all his beautiful portrait work and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was just uninterested in that up until not that many years ago. I didn't care about the person that I was photographing at all. I was just looking at the shape of the whole of the image.
The composition and all of that.
But, yeah.
And what does an assistant photographer do? Like you were assisting people, I mean, for people who don't know.
Back then it was a different ball game because it was much more complicated technically.
Sure.
So it was a pretty big responsibility.
This was pre-digital.
Oh yeah, it was many years pre-digital. Or many years, it was like maybe 15. I started when I was 15, and I think that we got digital when I was around 27, 28, so 13 years before digital. And we would have the responsibility of noting, where would you did these tests on the film to see, if you should develop it a little bit more, a little bit less in regards to the exposure. So you would note down that while shooting, and we would have thousands of films. So it was a big responsibility. If you screwed it up, you could do bad because there was no leeway.
Did you ever screw it up?
I didn't screw on that particular, but I did, did certain things that weren't too funny. I forgot like maybe 700 films in Italy once.
Whoa, you forgot them?
No, there was like a second door in a safe, in the back of a safe.
Alrighty.
So they were behind that door in a photographer's studio that we had borrowed for a shoot in Italy. And we had shot like, I think 2,700 films. But when I came back, I was like, something is missing here. That was not so nice. But no, nothing really bad. But no, there's stories about much worse.
Yeah, because actually at that time, the shot you can't do with digital. You can do so much in post, right?
Yeah, at that time, in particular when we were shooting transparency. So
yes.
Yeah, positive films.
Yeah.
Where you actually see the picture, right?
Yes.
Not negative. Those were, you couldn't even be off by a quarter of a stop, and now you can be off by 5 stops.
Yes, of course.
Enormous. I mean, it's daylight to basically a dark room. So back then you really had to be spot on, because if not, then the black would close down, or you would have no detail in the white. So it was very difficult and very very interesting actually, and something that I still sort of really.
There was an uncertainty about it.
Yeah, but then you got to master that obviously with training. You became a master of something, and I loved that mastering of a craft. and it's still a big sort of sadness in my life, to be honest, that craft has been lost with digital. But then there is another, then another focus.
Sure.
You look at something else, and you still have to be, a good eye. That
Sure.
eye, you can never, AI not going to find that eye. So that's the difference, and that's what we must sort of, what do you call it, lean on and believe that we can survive through having that eye
Sure.
and point of view. But I miss very much the days of, but it's come back. And became a big sort of, a lot of my old assistants, they would, call me, oh, you should, because you're so good at that, and you should start doing silhouette again, real film and all that. And I was like, you can do it on the digital, so it's totally immoral to use and destroy the environment with all those chemicals and stuff. But, that goes to show all this like green, people wanting to save the planet and stuff, but in fact, they don't care when it comes down. A lot of people don't care. A lot of people
Sure.
don't care, of course.
Sure.
But I do think it would be absurd to do. But it's become a big thing in the
Yeah,
fashion
absolutely.
photography, where everybody shoots real film and Polaroids again and stuff like that. And there are certain aspects where it's difficult to do it in digital, but it's definitely possible. I that's my firm belief.
Sure.
It's a bit of a trend thing.
It's more of a fad. Huh?
Yeah, it is.
So this exhibition you held at 17, where the makeup artist made that comment.
Yeah.
What was that exhibition? What was?
That was nude females.
Oh, nice.
Semi-nude females.
Okay.
In a very sort of, how can you say?
Erotic.
No, it's actually, I don't think that my some has become later on, and now I'm again through that period into something quite different. And to be quite honest, that was just a young man's looking at a beautiful woman. And the shape, not vulgar. It was very elegant and very sophisticated, I think. And I remember a dear brother of mine that we talked about earlier, let's not name names, but he was Master Charity, told him, why don't you become a photographer like Rasmus once? and this person that we talked went like, have you seen the picture that he's doing? And Master just said like, yes, it's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that.
Wow.
So it was, relieving a little bit of my guilt, so to speak, of that. But so yeah, I went from that, and then I probably went further and more very strong women, and I did several exhibitions since that were more successful, because the first one, it did sell a little to an art foundation and stuff, but I had a much more successful exhibition like 12-13 years back, and that was a very different way. But now I don't do except portraits, fashion, and beauty clients and stuff. But the art photography is a bit on hold for me.
And what about Heartfulness? What was your first introduction? Because you grew up in a family that was doing Sehajmarg,
Yeah.
right?
My
And
mom and dad went, coming back to our grandparents and their fame, or whatever you want to call that. They were very, even further back, my grandfather, the very famous Danish architect, who's still very famous. He's dead since I was, actually before I was born. But he came from something that you would, compare to Mormons in Denmark, in the north of Denmark. Very, very sort of religious, dark, a lot of guilt, and very dark circumstances, and I don't know what would be the good word, but yeah, heavy. And from those circumstances into becoming a superstar of this world where it was all about money and fame in some way. So yeah, I think that my parents, both in their own way, were searching for something else than what they had seen, which was just sort of after war materialism, and this absurdity of that, where there was no search for anything else than being famous and all that stuff. I remember my father said that once his father called him into his office and asked him, what do you want to be when you become big? And he said, a professional human being. Because he saw his dad being an unprofessional human being, and his dad smacked him. So they went in search for a master or a spiritual guide in India and traveled a year in India and never found the right one. I think I don't remember whom they were with, but that doesn't matter. But they found some, but they didn't feel it fit. So they went back to Denmark, and then a lady that they had met during their travels here in India contacted them like a few months later, as far as I remember, and told them, my master is coming to Denmark. Come and meet us. And I think they were between like the 3 first abbyasis in Europe. So they went and met Babuji in Denmark. So they went traveling in India and found him in Denmark. I love that. Typical Sarge Mark, typical Heartfulness. So yeah, my introduction was growing up in Sarge Mark with Babuji first, and then.
So they met Babuji before you were born?
They met Babuji. I don't know the year, to be honest. Maybe 69 or 70.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. And I was born in 74.
Wow. So they were pretty much settled and established in the practice. They were doing their Sahaj Mark, visiting India and all of that.
Yeah.
And
traveling in India.
So what did you as a kid think? I mean, were you, because did you discuss it with your friends? Did your friends find it weird that your parents
that
did
was actually something that I obviously have given a lot of, because we are formed and shaped by our youth and childhood.
Sure.
I felt, I remember laying at Babuji's feet, literally, with all the other kids and sleeping on hours on end in our house, not our house, but Michala's house in Denmark, Edersvej, where that picture from Babuji reading Einstein with Daaji sitting next to him. That bed Babuji would sit in, and we would lay in front of that bed and just sleep for hours.
Wow.
So I remember him, and I remember the vibe, and that's not something you really have words. It's like when you see Master. I just saw Daaji again after 3 years, and you don't have words for what you feel there. So I think that was a lot of, for me it was very embarrassing, to be honest, when I was younger. I felt embarrassed in front of my friends, but I don't know if they found it very very weird, actually. I found it weird.
So it was a self-imposed embarrassment kind of thing. Yeah.
I never had somebody say anything very negative or anything like that. I do actually remember, funnily enough, that stands out to this day. One of my really good friends, a friend in school, who during a class meeting did an obscene gesture towards God. And I remember how upset I became about that. I never spoke with him since. I cut him out of my life because he did that to God. So in some way, I was pretty fundamentalist about certain things that had to be respected, I think. But my sister and my cousin were much more at ease with that. We were at the same school and basically the same. My sister is 2 years younger, and Malina and I were the same age. So they felt much more at ease, as far as I know. And then later on it became, it turns, and then at some age, the kids at school, they thought it was cool to come to my house and try to eat with their hands like they did in India, and my parents were doing that. So, but there were other things in my childhood that were difficult, and Sarge Mark doesn't save you from that.
Sure. Each one of us goes through stuff.
And my parents, they had their issues. I think you could say that, mildly spoken, and I think that I've always had the feeling that Babuji was, let's say, he needed certain people, and so he pulled them ahead, maybe a little fast, and it had some consequences. That was my feeling.
Mm-hmm. But your interaction with Chariji must have been much more than Babuji, because he became
he was the one that I would consider. I never called Babuji master. I was 9 years old when he died.
Mm-hmm.
But Chariji was my master, definitely. But Babuji as well, but when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And I never felt any difference. We were afraid of Chariji when he was he's next to Babuji because of that big tooth. He didn't have that later on, but he had this big tooth, so he looked like scary. And he would always beat us, or for fun, of course. But loved
discipline
him.
you?
No, not at all discipline. No, just with the stick or whatever. Nothing. No, but just really, he just looked very imposing because he's
Sure.
so big and strong. But I just had the grace, and I still feel that was it is a blessing for me that I have never had any. For me, it's just that one continues in the next.
Sure.
It's really
Sure.
the feeling I have. So for me, there's absolutely neither with Daaji. Then you have other things where you see they have different characters, of course,
Of course.
but they do become the same. I really think so.
Yeah, in an amazing, beautiful way.
Yeah,
They
fantastic
do.
way.
They do certainly become the same.
Yeah.
So when did Sahaj Marg become your journey? I mean, it was definitely your parents' journey,
Yeah.
but when did it become your journey, or was it always?
I think it was, there was definitely a period where I was very much in opposition and provoking and, but I would always come when Master was there and, I would always be around. And like when I just said I went to New York when I was 17, he was on the phone telling me to go home and all these things. So, and I remember, to be quite honest, at some point I was really panicky. I literally remember it like if it was yesterday. I was standing and talking. I called him because I was freaking out about cockroaches everywhere in my apartment.
In New York?
In New York.
Hmm.
And so I didn't call my mom, I called Charlie. So in some way, I was already at least at his feet. That's my feeling. But, but starting meditation came only at 21.
Hmm.
I think they had rats for a while. And at some point, I was working for this most amazing, who's still a dear friend of mine, a gentleman who became my photographic master, and like a father figure in photography, and a father figure. But it was very much like if he was living what my grandparents were living. So he was a first generation sort of successful in his chain. And he lived only that. And I just remember thinking that it can very easily become that. And then life is wasted, in fact, if you don't. So I went to I went to make demands to Master, actually, in Vratz. And I sat down with him and I demanded that he guarantee that I could become famous and rich. Absolutely ridiculous when I look back at it. But I remember it as if it was yesterday. And he actually said that he promised me that, and he would even kick me if I didn't. So I believed him. But I think that for me it was actually, I had this judgment, which is just purely judgment because it's not at all the reality. But I saw at that time unsuccessful people practicing Sahaj Marg.
Sure.
From my point of view.
Not materially successful, not famous, not...
Yeah, exactly. So in some way, when I look back now with my life having been lived a long time now, and with the experiences and hopefully a little bit more humility, I regret that point of view, but that was my point of view back then. I really saw them as losers. Hippies, losers that didn't work, and some of them definitely were, most definitely, and that's a very Danish thing because we have money even if we don't work, and so that creates losers, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Robert often tells me about a district in Copenhagen called Christiania.
Yeah, Christiania, yeah. But we had nothing to do with that in our family to some extent. My father is with a woman who actually grew up there. And there's a lot of beautiful ideas deep down, but there's a lot of beautiful ideas in communism as well.
Sure,
and they
sure.
didn't work for humans.
Yeah, they didn't work out.
And I think Christiania should be, really, in my opinion, they should flatten it and remove it because I think it's just so absurd.
It's a good idea gone wrong.
I think it's it's like literally like communism. Let's not pay any taxes and just be good to each other. Yeah, come on. I mean, how do you think Denmark works? You know what I mean? And then it became basically a drug dealing hub.
Yeah.
Because there's not there used to be not that much law there, so the police couldn't really go there and stuff. So the dealers would be there of hashes and stuff, and now it became not just hashes, and a lot of hard drugs and.
Wow.
And in principle, but I think that goes to show a lot of humanity. This idea that I'm not political, but and and I do think that there are left things that are good, but right things that are good as well,
Sure.
politically speaking.
Sure.
But I think that in French we call it gauche caviar. The people on the left eating caviar. And there's a bit much of that in Denmark, I think, where you have all the right principles. As long as you've tons of money, it's very easy.
Sure.
But they have to make them somehow. Seems like it.
Yeah. So obviously, your family was, both your grandfathers, extremely successful in their fields, and that is probably where the success part came from. Where
the desire for it, probably yes.
Yeah. You mentioned your maternal grandfather was a landscape artist.
Yeah.
And
architect.
Architect.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he I have beautiful paintings from him of gardens that we were doing. But I honestly don't know that much about him besides that, and him and his wife living this sort of like, I see pictures of them looking like Cary Grant with Ingrid Bergman or something like that.
Wow.
Literally, they looked like those characters, and they dressed like those characters, and they would fool around in the garden taking pictures of my maternal grandmother in beautiful hats and stuff. And but I have no clue about his character actually.
He was. You didn't get to meet him?
No, I never met any of besides my grandmother, who became very close. To do what he did is unforgivable, I think. And I think
the suicide.
Yes, killing yourself for any reason. It's just, I think it's the worst crime you can do. I don't think that. I think murder is less bad to some.
Yeah, I think it's. I read it somewhere. Maybe it's Daaji that I read that it's a way to try and hurt those who are closest to you.
Yeah, probably, and you do. You even hurt generations that are unborn, which is quite impressive. That I see a lot of my mother's pain and how much that complicated my life because of her destruction or whatever destroyed in her because of this suicide. So, but it's many things together, of course, not just one.
And it was related to a project, you said, work project.
Yeah, obviously you don't commit suicide for any project if you're in a good state. I mean, I've lived very tough situations in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We have master and we have our family, so we don't commit suicide. I've lived certain situations not that long ago where I would say that the first time of my life I could actually feel why people would commit suicide. Not that I would ever think about doing it, like ever, not under any circumstances, because I know you close the eyes and you're gonna be reborn as a monkey in a cage somewhere. So I prefer to, but you see what I mean?
Sure.
There's a very dramatic, karmatic consequence.
Impact, yeah.
So I wouldn't do that, for egoistic reasons. But I could see where people would, the carpet is pulled so dramatically from under your feet at certain points in life. It was for me, and if you don't have your master, if you don't have your family, then I can see why people would do such a thing, because there really literally isn't anything to live for, and it's just almost hell, But it's part of our process, all human beings.
Sure. So at 17, when you moved to New York, what was that like? So the first time you were out of Denmark?
No, not out of Denmark, but first time I moved out of Denmark, and first time on my own.
Okay.
I had been in India on my own when I was 16, traveling around India, which was very dramatic.
What was that like? What was
that?
India?
Was actually not only to see master. My then girlfriend had lived here for a year or 6 months, and I went to bring her home, and she was going home, so I went to see India. And we were traveling around the south of India and stuff, and we did see master when he was building the first, there was just the kitchen in Manapakam.
Wow, yeah.
And I remember seeing Sulochana, and she always loved me for some strange reason. She was like, Rasmus, and I was like, Sulochana, how are you? And it was very sweet. And master was there, but we didn't stay. We traveled around and we came back. And then going to New York was a very different experience. It was not a good experience for me in some way, but now I can see that I didn't die from it. Master didn't want it, and I can kind of see why. But I think he might what do I know? He knows everything, in my opinion. But there might have been an aspect of him thinking that I would party a lot, and that's never been in me. I've never partied a lot. I've never done drugs. I did try to smoke joints a couple of times when I was at that age and younger, but I hated it. But I don't know why Master was so against it, because I know that he was for it for other people. But anyway, I ended up coming back after a little less than a year, and I was very happy to be back.
But it's very surprising, the line that you're in, fashion photography, and you've done projects for the biggest brands and for Vogue and many, many projects. Because one gets this picture from the outside that, oh, this is, drug-fueled, champagne-fueled work. It's, there's a lot of partying that goes on. But you mentioned you were never really into that stuff. So is that just a creation of people's kind of...
No, actually, I don't think it necessarily is. I don't know if it's only that. I think that there are everything in every business. I have, strangely enough, most of my friends in Paris are lawyers, because I played football, soccer on a team of one of their companies. So I got like lots and lots of friends that are lawyers, and I can tell you that they don't live in a particularly healthy way. So I think that I had this thought the other day, because I haven't, let's say, I've had many years of frustration, because I, to be quite honest, felt that Master was holding my success back. And I had discussions with my dear friends, about that quite often as well. And it was annoying and irritating and very frustrating in many ways. And then, like, very recently, let's say 3-4 years ago, I took a real hard look at my work for the first time in my life, quite objectively, I think, at least as objective as we can be. And I really realized that I was not as good as I thought I was, and that I would have to really work my ass off if I was going to even survive. And we're just talking surviving, not success, not being like, oh, number one and blah, 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 because I never came to that. And I just think that in some way, and there is what I wanted to say is that I saw a guy who is like number one of the real top guys in the business at the moment, a photographer, who did a cover for one of the major magazines recently, and I saw a little film that they did on set with that guy, and I could see his behavior and the ego at that level in full flower, and I was kind of like, okay, for nothing will I ever want to be that, ever. So it was protection probably, and who knows if it was Master or the Master. I don't think that Master Charity was sitting and pulling the strings per se, but the Master in me probably kept it at some distance. So I didn't really get it, which is frustrating, and it still is frustrating. But if that, the ego so easily gets out of proportion. Even in Sahaj Mark, we see it everywhere. People,
absolutely,
they get a tiny bit attention from Master, and our egos go. And mine
totally
did that many times during my life as well. And I know all the kids from Sahaj Mark in Denmark. We've been through our own ringer in that sense, where we feel better than the others because Master is looking more at you or whatever.
Sure.
And I think it happens so easily to a human being. So if you really come to a stage where I'm probably not at all yet, but if you come to a stage where you really, okay, what is the, and I do feel that now, 49 years old, and what I went through the last years that were very tough years, you start seeing the end. It's not like you just have eternal life, and eternal time. So you start saying, okay, another 20 years of good work and mental health and hopefully staying fit. 20 years is nothing.
True.
So if you start saying to yourself, okay, what is it that I need to really succeed in spirituality and to get to our goal, which is to become one with him? It's definitely not an ego boost that you need. You don't need to run around like thinking that you're a superstar. That's not going to help you in any way getting closer to him. That's not my feeling. And a little anecdote or a little way that I would observe that I've said often to people is that with Martin, I don't know if you remember, but we were always standing in the door of Master's house and sort of keeping the door so that people could come in and out in Europe, both in France and in Scandinavia, in Denmark. And the one only person that never made a trouble in that door of anybody in Sarsmark was Daaji. He
Wow.
would always respect whatever master had said. Just turn around, go back to bed, or go read a book or whatever. And that for me is now when he's the master. He was not the master back then, but we just, like anybody else, he was our uncle or brother or whatever you want to call it. But I can definitely see that now, that he had something where he was, I don't know, able to erase, or what do you call it, delude himself, and trying, or at least he was very aware of the need for that. Or I don't know, maybe it's just his character. Who knows about that? But I'm just saying that at some stage, I hope that it's even difficult when you think about the fact that you have to go out there and make money, and it's already that push, keep pushing. And now I'm pushing with my physics again, my body, because I needed to get strong again and feel strong again. And it is so difficult to, practice is probably the solution.
Yeah.
I have to try it someday. But
no, but I get what you mean, that you have to be. Success can be very harmful, spiritually also. I mean, material success can be extremely harmful.
Yeah,
but if you're ready
for it, if you're ready for it, yes and no.
Yeah,
yes
in a sense, you could say like Daaji was obviously ready for success.
Yeah, but probably, in my opinion, his soul was already ready for that.
Yes,
I don't think that. I don't think it's a character thing in his case.
Yeah,
and in most cases. Even looking at his sons now, who it's not really, it's the souls. It's. I feel
they can handle that.
I think that I wouldn't have been able to handle. I've seen myself behave really badly with success and ego, and it's not even like nasty to other people or anything like that. It's just you get out of focus. And you get out of your center in some way, and everything is fun, and it's a wild feeling, and I crave it all the time. I crave that kick of, creating. Even is a sort of ego, or not ego, but it's a manifestation which is beautiful as well. It is beautiful, because we're not here just to sit and meditate all day long.
Yeah.
But in my case, I don't know about other people, because so obviously Daaji was able to deal with that and became massively successful financially and in every way, and he never lost his path, or whatever you want to call it, or he never came off track, or what do I know, but it seems like he never came off track.
But also in the artistic field, do you think that it's like to succeed maybe in information technology, in IT, or on the stock market, there are lots of people who succeed, but in the artistic field, the top of the pyramid is really small. I mean, not everybody gets their image on the cover of Vogue, or not everybody. So,
and that's
there's a very small group of.
Yeah, I mean, because I have had my cover of certain Vogues and all these things, but that does not mean that I ever got even close to the top. And I really did not get close to the top, in the sense that there are hundreds of photographers that are much, much, much more well known than I am. But I think that for me, it's not really the issue. Definitely is that, yes, of course, if you get to a top of, and keep people carry you around, and tell you you're the best every day and all day long, you how are you going to stay normal in that? It's really difficult.
Sure.
And but I'm even at the level where I'm really trying to see what is it that happens when I get successful. What is it that it starts in me? And I can already, not already, but I can see that there are things in me that always gets sort of like, that comes up with this joy of creation and creating. And I think my life is much more about even just fighting to be able to create, because it's almost came to a point where I almost couldn't work anymore, because there was no work for me. There was other people working, but I wasn't working. And now I'm working again, quite a lot even, on certain things. Maybe not financially very good yet, but artistically it's one of the best periods of my career at the moment. So I'm just very concerned about trying to keep it to keep the energy. How can you call it? Decent. Or,
Sure, sure. So, very often people say that a person's state of mind shines through in their work. Do you think it's that way with photography too? Do you feel there are certain photographers where their state of mind or their state of whatever their state of mind be, a disturbed state of mind or a very peaceful, calm, humble state of mind shows through in their work?
Obviously, it would. In any work come through, but obviously, since our work is visual and or is manifested in that sense visually, then you can see it. Whereas if we can't really see it with a broker sitting on his computer, but even the broker on his computer works better if he's in a sacred or in a solid state of mind. Let's put it that way. It would be my opinion, but that doesn't mean they can't sell a ton of stuff even if they're cocaine. So all those things has to come. But in art, I definitely think that you can see that it comes through in the work. But the unfortunate thing as an artist that I came to realize, I can't say for everybody because I'm sure that there are art forms where you don't need to come to realize that, but how to put it, if you because I would really define my career as a partly commercial, and that goes for all the Vogue and all that, where there are very clear demands. I have to show this clothes on this model, and this clothes is more important than that clothes because it's a major advertiser in that magazine. All these things are sort of commercial. But if I purely look at the art, like, okay, I want to create a piece of art, I've always, obviously thought a lot about that. Then it is not too impossible to make something that would communicate and pull interest in our world today that is about God, or that is very light, and it's very, very difficult to find. I think that there are some photographers that does it in other, like they photograph workers in Brazil. There's a fantastic photographer called Sebastião Salgado who is doing amazing.
Of course, yes,
you know him.
yes.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
fantastic. I love
Phenomenal.
his work.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Except, but it's nothing to do with my. I don't have that capacity at all. It's not my style, and there are other people that do portraits, and I'm probably ending up much more over here in that ball game somehow. But like art in an art gallery, it's so much easier when it's obscene, or when it's provocative, or when it's dark, and that we all have in us, so we can look after that, or we can search for that. And I probably played with that. I didn't really go there, but in some way I played with that in a way where you because it is really and I'm not in a place now, like I just said, I don't do any artwork because I can't just photograph some idea of God, or it would be ridiculous. So I have to find a way where it becomes like Salgado or somebody like. But I went to Paris. Paris Photo is the biggest photo exhibition in the world, and I went for the first time because I've always been afraid of letting myself inspire too much, which is stupid. But that was one of my sort of principles all early on. That it had to come from above, or some bullshit.
Original.
Yeah, original. But in some way you need to get inspired, because everything is a conditioning in some way. Anyway, I had that belief. But now I went, and I must tell you that I spoke with a gallerist, a friend of mine, after. There was not one single photo on that exhibition that was beautiful. It was absurdly bad. Like so bad. I called up my friend who is a gallerist that I exhibited with, and I told him, he's called Renaud, what do you think? And he was like, you're right. There's a guy who did Sebastião Salgado, but like a tourist, and people loved it. He just took the same idea, went to the mines in Brazil, and he photographed, but there was none of that heart, none of that grittiness, none of that extraordinary beauty that Sebastião Salgado is capable of. So if that's the game that I'm not going to go there. Then I prefer to be in my commercial role and just enjoy that and be sort of more of a commercial machine. I much prefer that.
You know, it's interesting. I was speaking to Kathleen Scarborough the other day, and we were talking about how the art scene is pretty much, for artists, for painters, is pretty much controlled by the curators and the galleries of the world, and they decide who to promote, who not to promote. Is photography a similar thing?
Yeah, 100%. But I do think, Rudy, that I've also said that kind of thing, and I don't know the lady that you just spoke with, so it's not to say that she's maybe mistaken at all. But I think that I've said that a lot. But I also think that there is another aspect, which is that even if it takes you your whole life and you don't get recognition in the life, if you are really good, you will come through. So you just have to really work on your own work and not think about, I had my chances, and I could definitely see that the only time I ever sold pictures were totally because of the gallery. And the doors that gallery, because it's a famous name in America, it opened so many doors. And so many other galleries from around the world, even China, everywhere, they came and wanted the exhibition and the pictures they sold, because that's so human. It's a blue stamp, and they say, okay, this is a quality, so then people, they're buying it. But wouldn't you, if you were investing your money, because a lot of the thing is investment also, people, we all like if it takes value after some time, of course, and if you buy it at that gallery, you have much more chance that it will take value. So I think there's a totally natural aspect to that, or it's a reality that we just have to live with. But I do think that as an artist, you mustn't even try, because it must be pure in some way, to some extent. But that's the real difficulty of art, is that, how are you going to get food?
Sure, yeah.
So that's always the horror of that, is that how are you going to get food? But we have another Abiasi who is an art professor now, and he has the perfect setup in Dresden.
Oh, Christian, yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
And I feel that he has the perfect setup.
Where he gets a paycheck, because
a paycheck from a wonderful job where he teaches wonderful pupils and give them lovely lessons, I'm sure. And then he can do his real art without having that pressure. And I'm sure that when that pressure is removed, you can actually start creating real art. Because if you're trying, if I do, for paint, I don't know, this color, if I start, should I do this or should I do that? Because what sells the most, That's, to be honest, that's why I went to Paris Fashion, Paris Photo, was to see what's moving and where should I bring myself towards to be able to monetize my art. And I was just like, forget about it. I mean, it's the only beautiful picture on that whole exhibition was an original Irving pen, literally, in Hamilton's. They had a stand there, Hamilton's gallery from London, and they had a couple of Irving pens and maybe one Helmut Newton. The rest of that whole exhibition, and we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures, and literally none of it came to anywhere near anything. It's absurd.
Wow. Yeah, it's really interesting that the struggle to make money and the struggle to produce art. I think it's something that will continue. That push and pull.
Yeah.
You don't know how it will play out. Like, people have favorite cars, right? People have favorite. Do you have like a favorite camera? Do photographers have favorite cameras? Like,
I think it's a tool. Yeah, I've had that question asked before, obviously. It's right now, like, with your equipment, that, I would say that right now I'm working back to something much more simple. I used to work with Phase One, which is a Danish brand.
Yeah, of course, Phase One's
and
very expensive.
Yeah, very, very expensive.
Yeah,
and I went with something much cheaper, still but because all I wanted is to be able to print to a certain format, and now, and tough luck for Phase One, but it's obviously they're gonna be outphased because there is no way that they can keep those prices. We don't need 150 million pixels. We need 50 million. We can print anything with 50 million, and then what I was really looking into is something about sharpness on the capture, because there's a big difference between Canon and Nikon. I just tested it, and I thought personally that I liked Nikon the most, and then about the sensibility to the light, which has been a complete, like literally a game changer for me. 4 years ago, I started shooting only daylight again, so I basically never shoot with
Artificial light.
artificial light. Like I would say 1 out of 100 shoots is with artificial light. Like maybe 5 times in the last 4 years. And I hate it when I work artificial lights now. And I used to only do artificial light. I would even bring artificial lights outside because I felt that if not, it was not my picture. If I hadn't painted the light, then it was not my picture. And now I'm like, we have the most, by far, beautiful light in daylight. It's obviously not something that, if you were doing like this as a portrait series, if this was a film thing and you wanted it the same all the way through, you can't do it with daylight, obviously. But there's nothing that even comes close. So I'm really enjoying the fact that now we can shoot under very low light circumstances, like low light, what do you call it? Yeah. Low light.
Yes.
Which we couldn't before. Because even the first phase 1 bags, they were like absolute, you couldn't go beyond 50 ISO, which is like nothing at all.
Nothing, yeah.
You need so much light. So you could shoot like, yes, out in the real daylight, but if you were indoor or if it was low light outside, you couldn't shoot. And now you can actually shoot in like extremely low light, and it's just so poetic and beautiful, and you get so much more emotion and poetic.
Yeah. Also, the quality of light in different places is different, right?
Yeah.
So, you can capture that too, that
of course.
in different places in the world, you'll have a different quality of light there.
Absolutely.
Also, there has been, people with iPhones are taking photographs, people with, everybody has a camera now, a cell phone is a camera, you carry it around all the time. So I think we are probably the most photographed generation up till now,
Sure.
And also we have CCTVs on every street, so we are being observed at all times, photographs. The image is being captured somehow or the other. Do you think that is a good thing in the sense that it shifts the focus back on content? It's not so much on equipment. Or do you think that we've lost something, we've been desensitized by the bombardment of all these images?
Obviously when you talk with photographers, colleagues, and even other people in my business, we all have the feeling that something has been lost, and something definitely have been lost. I mean, we still have print magazines, which is just a blessing for us because it actually is printed, which is something that we do enjoy. But
who knows for how long?
Yeah, and it's gonna end for sure. I can tell you the other day I was printing some pictures for the first time in a while, like nice, big, real, beautiful prints, and I felt like human again. Yeah, I literally, I think while I'm shooting now, I think about how it's going to look next to each other, 3x3 on Instagram, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's like super small. So you're like, that's actually where it's at. But that's reality, and we just have to live with it and roll with it, and create tons of content. That's what we're doing with our clients now. That if I knew that 10 years ago, I think I would have jumped out from a building. It's just so sad in some way, the amount of content that they think that we should just perform like a factory of imagery, and that's not how it works. And some clients are coming around to understanding that there is a difference if you shoot 200 pictures in a day or 5 pictures in a day. But obviously a lot of the young people, they don't care, they just want to survive. And obviously I, to some extent, will go far now to survive. I'll do anything to survive, we all do. So that's the reality of the situation.
So what's the focus going forward, Rasmus? Is it still fashion for you, or are you going to focus on other stuff? Are you exploring new avenues as well in photography?
No, I'm definitely really pushing with my fashion at the moment, which is strange because it's not my force. It's not where I'm the best, but I just love it. It's not because I'm very into fashion. I really am not. That's really probably a major issue, actually. But I am into creating with a group of people. I love that so much. And I love that it's crazy people, that there's some absolute madness because but there's some amazing true beauty sometimes as well, and it's very subtle. It's very, very subtle I think that in like in everything that is visual arts, I can only talk about that. It probably is the same in music. The difference between absolute excellence and that lamp, I shoot with that lamp, and everybody else shoots with that lamp, but the result is not the same. So it's small details that creates the whole difference, and I see that with my co-workers, with the people I work with, that one stylist can create like really a stunning image for me. So I'm just registering it, but she's or he is the one creating it with a hat or whatever it is, and it is really some and that's what that's my way forward, is to come back and work with like the top people is what I'm aiming at, because there is a huge difference. Like it's so much more massive than I actually thought, and they're few. So that's the other thing, when we look at football, they almost run the same speed, and but there's just few Ronaldos and few Messis. It's not the same. And
True.
when you really start seeing that, meeting those people, and maybe being even sensitive to those people, because maybe I was not that sensitive to that when I was younger, and now I am starting to get more sensitive to that because I crave it and because I want to go there with my work, and a lot of people will not see the difference if I show my work. Some people will say, yeah, but that's the same as that. But I don't think so, and a lot of people don't think so. So I think it's the same with art, But art is it's much more sort of like in the eyes of beholder. I think that I actually like that with our business there are some certain givens. You're photographing a model with some clothes on, but then there are, how do you get that? Now for instance, there was a long trend with the models becoming like of all colors, of all even genders and stuff, which I think is very interesting, because suddenly I'm not photographing white young girls full of themselves anymore, like literally almost never, which is fantastic, a joy not to do that. So I photograph 3 kids from an African village that were cast, and 3 boys literally that came from somewhere in Uganda, and they came to Paris, and suddenly they're standing there and laughing their little asses off in a fantastic situation, and it was absolutely wonderful. But they were like kids, like 18 years old kids, but they have so much innocence and beauty, So that is fantastic, I think, and that's really where I get my kick now, is these characters that I can find, and I have a new job now when I get back to Paris, where it's like these, we are casting characters, and the quirkier the better somehow, and that's fantastic, I think.
There's a lot more diversity.
Yeah, diversity, and just to sort of like embrace that, and sometimes you have ideas, or I'm maybe a bit old-fashioned in many ways, and I think that's fine. But I'm kind of open actually artistically, in the sense that I photograph whatever. I photographed a particularly absurd guy who was massively fat, and there was something wrong with that, because it was not healthy the way he was fat. So it's just as bad as all the skinny girls. Nothing. You die as fast as being if you're massively fat. So but you see what I mean? There's some very hypocritical thing there as well. Let's photograph some huge big fat guy, and then that's hip. I hate that, but it was very fascinating to try to find beauty in something that I've never tried to find beauty in before. So you see what I mean?
Yes,
doesn't
absolutely.
make it right. And I did have a conversation with everybody at the shoot about it. I told the guy, because I really liked him, I told him, we're sort of like glamorizing you,
it's like,
but you're committing suicide.
It's like weight porn, you might say. It's like they say poverty porn. People who go into slums and take photographs just because they want it's like pornography out of poverty.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, because I was speaking to a person who's into fashion and who's into luxury fragrances, and he was telling me that one thing that he has to deal with in that line of work is sexual advances. Sexuality is very much a part of the whole thing.
About selling perfume?
No, he sells luxury perfume, and he's also in the fashion industry.
Okay.
And he says sexuality is pretty much a part of that lifestyle. It's about. So, as a fashion photographer, is it difficult to deal with the whole sexuality of the whole thing? Because fashion also can be very sexual.
Yeah, and I think that then I should be honest. I mean, and I think, like I said, Why would I photograph my rabbits when I was 8 years old and naked girls when I was 17? That's obviously because my sexuality was driving me towards that, no doubt. And I think that I've never been in that, how can you say, part of fashion like people would see in a movie. And it exists. And I have been to sets where, it's very, fancy and all that. But, people forget that there is a ton of pressure, ton of money being spent. So we all have our responsibilities. So I wouldn't say that's a very sexy setting. It's a very pressured setting, and I love that pressure. But I think that I've always joked around when people would say, yeah, but all these girls and stuff. I would find girls if that was my thing, and which it has been, and I like that when I was younger, particularly. If I was working at a bakery, it would be the same. I don't think you can behave well and you can behave bad anywhere you are, but obviously it's easier for a fox to behave badly in a hen house. So in some way, yes. But in another way, I think that Rudy, it's more subtle actually for certain. I think that there is more something about creating that attracts, because it is very attractive. And, a good way to put that is that I now have in my building in Paris, which is sort of like this Atelier des Artistes, it's called Artist's Place. There's a magician that I became really good friends with, and his parents are extremely famous, a musician and an actress, and he's very sensitive to creation and energy of creation, and he can literally feel when I'm shooting in my house. He'll come and he's attracted to the energy, and that's not sexual energy. Is it? Maybe. That I don't know. Master would know that. But I do think creation is sexual energy, Kundalini and all that. So in some way, maybe. But it's not because something sexual is going on. I'm photographing like kids most of the time, in any way, kids. And I'm not attracted to an 18-year-old girl. So in some way, or I'm photographing a black boy. But the creation itself, that energy of creation is something that is maybe, can be...
It's
addictive.
palpable, yeah.
Yeah, and also can be, But, I don't think that if you behave well, I never had a model come up to me, and it happened maybe twice or three times in my 40 years of career that a model would come and where you felt, okay, this is actually, this girl is ready to do something that she shouldn't be doing because she needs this. And that for me is like absolutely no go. So I don't even, it's not attractive to me. It's just horrible, and I pity that girl, and I think it's sad for her. A Russian girl did something like that, but for a job where she could have made like more than 200,000 euro in 20 days. So when you think about that, in those times with Russia, where her parents were probably making $40 a month, then 200,000 euro is like maybe $10 million for me or something like that. So I would like to be ready to jump out a window for that. And I don't judge that. I just register that girl, she was ready to behave badly, what I would think was not good for her. But who am I to judge, honestly?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, there's people in Russia dying on the street of cold in that period, particularly. I don't know.
So in your whole stint in fashion, how do you think the fact that you are also involved in a spiritual practice, also have a master, just kept you grounded? Because it's very easy to go insane in that world too.
It's very easy to get off track. I don't think that I work with insane people. To be honest, I think that there are few that you can definitely say that person is insane. But I actually work with people that are highly professional most of the time. So that's the fashion world, the one that I see. It's very, very serious people that are working very, very hard and have something, a passion for something. So get off track is what I would want to call it, because I think going insane is something that you can do then anywhere.
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
Yeah. So I think that Master has definitely helped me and still am helping me, I'm sure. I'm hopefully in less need of help, so I am not weighing on him like I used to weigh on him, I hope. It's an ongoing, like they say in America, the jury is still out on that one. In my case, yeah.
Sure.
But I think that now what I can see is that there's an openness, and people are attracted to. Let's say I'm more open about sharing my other side with people, where I was maybe more. When you're younger, you're more insecure, and you know that
You don't know how people will react.
it's not about knowing not how people will react, actually, I think, because I've always been open in that sense, but having enough energy to share other things than just trying to keep the ship sailing in the right direction. That's the way I want to put it. Because now I do actually have enough energy. I'm professional enough, and I am resting peaceful enough in my capacity or in my capabilities as a photographer, so I can actually sort of be more concentrating on the more subtle levels. And I think that when you concentrate on the subtle levels, you're already working with heartfulness in some way, because you're giving people something, and by giving them that, they get a very good experience, and therefore they also perform much better. I'm not saying like I'm thinking I'm gonna give them love or master to sort of put gas on their engine and make them run faster. Not at all. But I think that there is a real joy in sharing these moments with humans that are all extremely insecure. And that's one thing that you come to realize, that even like the top person will come into a job and they will be super insecure because we don't have anything yet. And everybody wants to try to have everything prepared with mood boards and what have you. And so, but the more you do of that, often the less magic will happen. So I always try to make it a good balance. Obviously the magazine, the client, whatever, they need to have an idea of where you're going to bring this and where you want to go. But approximate. And I try to keep it as blurry and as approximate as possible to create over here and have, openness and as a white canvas as possible, because obviously on the day there are 100 things that will always go its own way.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the makeup artist might be in that mood, and the model might be, so.
Yeah.
And I think that there is something really quite beautiful about that. So that's really
about the unpredictability also.
Yeah, about the but also about the sharing of experience. And,
yes.
And the shared experience, which is what we do here as well when we go for satsang or
Absolutely.
we go to see Master at his house. We share an experience, and I think it's the same wherever and whatever we do. In fact, and I would love to be able to get to a place where there is no, this is maybe hurting, this could hurt me spiritually. I'm just gonna create and make it an environment where it's only good for everybody, and then sexuality is not part of that, because sexuality is always creating a mess. In our personal human, on our own, but especially in a group, obviously, but I'm not shooting a lot of, or doing a lot of pictures at the moment where it's not very popular to do. There is a part of the business that is very much into sexuality, but mine is not anymore. It's not about that. And it might become that again, but it can be done as a sort of game. But then there is also obviously a responsibility. What do we put out there? And then I have to admit to having in my head always had to sort of like, at least up until now, would Master do this picture? And no, of course not. That I've done a lot in my career and in my life, where I would have to say that Rasmus at his stage of evolution, he's doing this, but would Master do that? No, not at all. But that's and it's something I've done. I'm torturing myself with that kind of mind games, or setting up, because I do think we should do that every time. Everything we do, would Master do this? Would he say this? Would he behave like this? I say it to other people, and I say it to myself. If you have a conversation, I had a conversation with my one of my best friends the other day, and I just asked him, that person, if you are staying with that person, will that facilitate, will you be more in Kanha or less in Kanha if you stay with that person? and that you should be your answer to if you want to stay with that person. And I have been with many persons, or not many, but a few persons where it was the opposite. So I can permit myself to say that to my friend as well, because I can say I have done the opposite. I have stayed with that woman that would make my link to master more difficult to maintain. It would, you need to share, and I think you need to look at your life like that. If you want to speed up, and I'm at that stage now that I really want to push hard on the speeder and get to where I can get in my spiritual
and cut
journey.
out all the stuff that isn't helping.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, even with friends. At some point, you have to say, is that friend actually someone that I share values with? And if it's not, what is it that I'm actually seeing that friend for? To some extent, and you know what Master said about those things always. So we are on our journey by ourselves only, and it's a lonely journey in some way. No, it is.
Yeah, we walk alone.
Absolutely, and the further we get, the lonelier it gets. I think when you see him, he doesn't even have his master here anymore. He's all alone.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
So we have him. We have him.
Yes,
and
that's so beautifully put, Rasmus. I remember the first time I heard your name was actually because Elizabeth shared a folder with me of photographs that you had taken of Daaji.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really loved those photographs.
Yeah.
They were unlike photographs I had seen before of Daaji.
Yeah.
How did that come about? There was this set of photographs that you
from Montpellier.
Yeah, he was
in a blue.
He has a blue jumper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm strangely not very happy with those pictures. It's so sad to say that. My mom has them printed out on her wall and stuff.
No, but how did the whole thing come about? Was it set up?
How did it come about? I must have probably... Somebody asked me to do some portraits of him, I think, and he absolutely don't want to be photographed. I mean, I'm sure you...
Yeah, he's extremely reticent about being in front of the camera.
It's not his favorite place on earth, that's for sure. And I think that there are a couple of the pictures where, but how do you capture really that subtlety of his of his character, which is so... I think that you need to, and he actually told me that. Strangely, I come to think of that now. I'm like a painter almost with my camera. I set it up. Everything is set up. Everything is thought through, and that kills the spontaneity often. So it's something that I'm working a lot with actually since I photographed Daaji. Not because that I photographed Daaji, but that was sort of in the beginning of a period that I'm in now, where I work very hard on how do I actually capture that spontaneous moment with that person in front of my camera, and how do I not kill that. And the number one thing is you don't stress. You create an environment where they are at peace, so you can even transmit to them, or get this love energy into but with Daaji, I think I was very nervous, and he was very nervous and annoyed.
He was not happy.
I think it was okay. I think he was okay. It was kind of in a cool setting. But I photographed Christian at the same moment.
Oh, yeah?
And I could just feel he was easier to photograph for me because he was not my master. And because he was more at ease.
Yeah.
So it was a mix.
Yeah, it's amazing that you say that, because my wife always tells me that I take the worst photographs of her and my daughter.
Yeah. It is difficult to photo. I never photograph my loved ones. It's very often, I'm telling you, it's strangely,
Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah.
It's very strange. But Rasmus, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and a lot of stereotypes that people have, that certainly I had about the fashion industry. It's great to break that down and
I think
understand
it's a point that I also thought that was interesting, that came up, this thing of I work with really, really weird characters. Like just last thing, like a guy that is in charge of a very big company in the world, in France, the French branch. His son is actually somebody, and we got friends through something else. And I found out that his son is a makeup artist that I work with, and he does these things where he dresses himself up almost like a queen, like in the movie Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So they make these masks, and you know what? When I look at that, I photographed him like that for a fashion story about Jean-Paul Gaultier. He's the nicest kid. I mean, it's just his thing and his stage and his life, that's where he's at.
Yeah.
And some of these people are just geniuses in their own way. And I mean, I've seen people in Sarge Mark that are much more rigid and much less interesting. And I've seen people that are so open and wonderful. And I'm really trying to myself focus on that part of it, because I've been very judgmental. And I still think that's the very difficult thing for us Abhyasis. I don't think it's a difficulty at all for a master, of course not. But I think that because we must be able to distinguish between right and wrong. That's number one. I think one of the main things in spiritual journey. And that can easily be misunderstood even by ourselves as being judgmental. And Master Daaji is very capable. I've seen that often with him in distinguishing between right and wrong. Obviously, it's his number one job. And at the same time, he never judges anybody. And imagine what he sees. I mean, of absurdities. I remember I had my introduction sitting by Charity in Vratz, and it was quite incredible, all the crap that I saw coming out of me during that sitting. And I was ashamed, because things that I not even had watched in movies, I never knew existed, I saw in that sitting. And I was like that after, and I said, did you see all that? And he said, don't worry, I've seen much worse. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, sure.
So I think that it's wonderful if we can be aware of what's right and wrong. And that's very difficult, and only getting more difficult in today's world.
Sure. Because as you said, we don't want to be judgmental, but we also don't want to be unaware of right and wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I think it's probably the biggest challenge. I feel that, at least the way I see it, it's one of the biggest challenges of humanity at the moment.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
But that was lovely.
nice.
Thanks so much, Rasmus. That was lovely. Thank you so much for tuning in to GhanaCast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. To listen to more such conversations, do subscribe to GhanaCast on YouTube, or you can also find us on Spotify on the GhanaCast channel. That is KANHACAST. Short excerpts from these conversations are also on Instagram. Once again, thank you for listening. This is Hill Dog signing off. Namaste and woof woof.